We've got to bounce back better after the pandemic. Boris Johnson's rallying cries the leaders of the G7 nations as they meet on the Cornish coast. After elbow bumps on the beach, the leaders get down to business, with the PM calling for a more equal global recovery from the virus.
And building back greener, and building back fairer, and building back more equal, and how shall I, more, in a more gender-neutral and perhaps a more feminine way.
But he also talked of the doubtless mistakes his government and others have made since the pandemic started. Robert will give us his take on proceedings, as too will the Queen.
Are you supposed to be looking as if you're enjoying it?
Yes, it definitely. We have been enjoying ourselves in spite of the criticism.
The Royals are on the charm offensive as they roll out the red carpet in Cornwall. The focus, the environment.
We are doing it for the pandemic, so if you don't mind me saying so, we must also do it for the planet.
But with COVID cases here rising at the fastest rate since the winter, Monday's big decision about ending restrictions could end up putting a dampener on things. It may be late, but it's not lost any of its excitement. The Euros kick-off complete with fans and fan zones. And a family holiday with a difference. The elephants trekking 300 miles through China and becoming online stars in the process.
This is ITV News at 10 with Charlene White.
Good evening. Boris Johnson has laid out what he says should be the big priorities of the 7 largest economies in the world. They're all meeting over the next few days at the G7 summit on the Cornish coast. He said they must learn from the mistakes of the pandemic and predicted that they would bounce back from the COVID recession, but they must bounce back better. In his vision, that means a recovery that helps all parts of society, including supplying 1 billion doses of COVID vaccines to poorer nations. A pledge which Oxfam says is just not enough.
The strangest of beach parties was getting underway in Cornwall this afternoon. The President of the United States and First Lady among guests invited for elbow bumps with the Prime Minister and Mrs. Johnson. Joe Biden, ever the seasoned diplomat, was happy to play along.
Everybody in the water.
But at this first post-Brexit G7, relations among the allies are under strain. The issue of Northern Ireland's status could easily knock things off course. The central focus for these leaders remains the pandemic and how the world can be better prepared in future. The Prime Minister today unusually frank about how it had been handled.
We've all been going through the most wretched pandemic our countries have faced for our lifetimes. We need to make sure that we learn the lessons from the pandemic. We need to make sure that we don't repeat some of the errors that we doubtless made.
With women's education also on the agenda, his hopes for the recovery included this unexpected promise.
Building back greener, and building back fairer, and building back more equal, and how shall I, more, in a more gender-neutral and perhaps a more feminine way.
Earlier, France's President Macron had made a point of hosting a separate gathering of European leaders, having warned ahead of the summit that the EU wouldn't tolerate any British attempts to renegotiate the Brexit deal.
Mr. Michel, are you hopeful you can reach agreement with Boris Johnson?
Hello, hello.
Do you trust the Prime Minister?
The EU Council President wouldn't say, but it seems Joe Biden was keen to find a way forward when he met the Prime Minister.
What really shone through is the President's determination to help uphold the Good Friday Agreement. It was achieved on the back of enormous amounts of American support. We've always had good American support from successive presidents. And as the Prime Minister said, on upholding the Good Friday Agreement, we're all on the same page.
But there are many here vying for the new president's attention. The United States potentially once again playing a key role in resolving squabbles among its European allies. Libby Wiener, News at 10, St Ives.
Well, our political editor, Robert PESTON, is in Cornwall for us, as you can see. Right, a couple of things first, Robert. What do you make of what the Prime Minister said about mistakes and also about those comments when he mentioned building back in a more feminine way?
So, yeah, that phrase, there have doubtless been errors made by him and other leaders. I mean, we're waiting, some would say, to hear Boris Johnson's personal self-analysis of the mistakes that he made. Obviously, lots of people think that, he should have protected care homes better. Actually, I spoke to his Foreign Secretary today about the fact that we didn't start mass testing till, months after the Asian countries did. And he admitted, Foreign Secretary, he said, we've got to put our hands up. We did get things wrong. Boris Johnson, in the context of this meeting of, the 7 leaders of the rich democracies, wants to focus on the fact that we need now a system of global surveillance, early warning systems, perhaps rules for how we close down borders for the next pandemic, because make no mistake, and every scientist I speak to says this will not be the last pandemic we face.
Robert, can we look ahead to what's happening tomorrow? Because Boris Johnson's due to hold those talks with the EU leaders, isn't he? Is it likely that, that simmering dispute over post-Brexit trading arrangements in Northern Ireland, the so-called sausage wars, do you think that will come up?
So, look, the Prime Minister was deeply relieved yesterday when the American president didn't sort of hold him personally responsible for what many European leaders see as a sort of, playing fast and loose with that Northern Ireland protocol, part of the Brexit deal we negotiated only a few weeks ago. But let's be clear, the Americans are very unhappy about potential destabilisation of the peace process in Northern Ireland. There are 5 European leaders in the room tomorrow, and British diplomats, indeed the Prime Minister, is nervous they're going to put pressure on him. And again, another thing I got from the Foreign Secretary today is, he didn't rule out the possibility of some kind of compromise over this weekend, although, frankly, I wouldn't bet on it. I think the Prime Minister's strategy is to get through this without a major row, and then there will almost certainly be a confrontation with the EU next week. OK, Robert, thank you.
Well, the summit marks a key moment for the royal family as well. It's the first big official engagement since the death of Prince Philip for the Queen, who gave a reception for the leaders tonight. Then Princes Charles and William hosted the inaugural banquet, which for the first time at a G7 summit included some of the world's top business figures, with the major themes for the evening: climate change and sustainability, close to Prince Charles's heart.
If there is some non-political firepower Britain can muster for events such as this, it is the royal family to whom the government will turn. The 95-year-old monarch and the most senior ranks of her family at Cornwall's famous Eden project tonight to charm the G7 leaders who'd gathered here. The official picture in front of the biomes made that much more noteworthy for the individual sitting in the centre who has seen so many political leaders come and go.
Are you supposed to be looking as if you're enjoying it?
Yes, definitely. We have been enjoying ourselves.
And while the immediate focus of the summit has been on the pandemic emergency, a plea tonight for the politicians to confront the climate emergency. It came from Prince Charles.
The fight against this terrible pandemic provides, if ever one was needed, a crystal clear example of the scale and sheer speed at which the global community can tackle crises. We are doing it for the pandemic. So, if you don't mind me saying so, we must also do it for the planet.
With the top tier of the royal family and world leaders at the Eden project tonight, there is a tight ring of security around the Cornish attraction. The government was not going to pass up on the opportunity of deploying the royal family to maximum effect. It is, after all, something Britain can do that very few other countries can. The royal programme at the G7 got underway in a small Cornish village earlier, with a sight villagers here had never seen before: The convoy carrying the First Lady navigating its way into a school playground. Jill Biden was meeting the Duchess of Cambridge here, two women who the head teacher of the school called passionate educators.
Hello, everyone.
Although a royal and a White House visitor at the same time appeared to stun the class of 4- and 5-year-olds into silence.
This is my classroom, yeah. It's the quietest class I've ever been into. I agree.
The focus of Kate's work for some time has been on the first 5 years of a child's life, more pivotal for development than any other moment. And as a former teacher herself, Dr. Biden knows the significance of what Kate is trying to do.
So I can tell you that as a teacher at the upper levels, if they don't have a good foundation, they fall so far behind.
This was clearly a meeting of minds, but before it ended, there was a question from an American reporter about that American baby, Harry and Meghan's, born last week.
Do you have any wishes for your new niece, Lilibet?
Oh, I wish her all the very best. I can't wait to meet her because we haven't yet met her yet, so hopefully that will be soon.
But tonight was about business, not family, and important questions on the pandemic and the planet. Chris Ship, News at 10, Cornwall.
The government's under intense pressure tonight to delay the date for lifting the lockdown after another big rise in COVID cases. According to Public Health England, more than 9 out of 10 new cases in the UK are estimated to be the Delta variant, which is now believed to be 60% more transmissible than previous strains of the virus. There were 8,125 new cases of COVID across the UK today, the latest peak in a sharp rise over the last 2 weeks and the highest daily number since February. These figures are the last to come out before Boris Johnson decides whether or not to go ahead with the so-called Freedom Day on June the 21st.
By all accounts, this is what is going to help lead us to freedom. But with the Delta variant first detected in India rapidly spreading, it's likely to be further off than we all hoped. In areas where cases are high, public health directors want certainty the government will delay.
I think it's really important that we don't lose the ground that we've gained from the previous lockdown, and therefore I think if we were to delay easing of restrictions, if the data shows that, which we'll clearly hear about more on Monday, but if the experience from Kingston and London shows you can get rapidly increasing rates.
Public Health England now thinks it's 60% more infectious than the so-called Kent strain. On June the 3rd, the number of cases of the Delta variant in the UK stood at around 12,000. That has since increased by nearly 30,000 to more than 42,000 today. PHE estimates infections are doubling every 4.5 to 11.5 days, which means a week from now there could be more than 85,000 cases. Nearly 2/3 of the cases were in people who hadn't been vaccinated, giving more hope the jabs are doing their job. But despite that, the biggest hint yet that postponing is on the cards.
Is the delay to unlocking going to be 2 weeks or 4 weeks?
You'll have to wait for Monday for that one.
No denial the 21st of June could be pushed back makes the owner of this comedy club even more anxious. Operating at just half capacity, he and other venues are desperate to reopen fully.
Science says one thing, we think another. Unfortunately, that doesn't help us for planning staff, stock, customers. You know, people aren't booking in advance now, so we need to get some sort of answer as soon as possible.
But the scientists are in agreement. Buying a bit more time could be the difference between a very large wave or a small one.
Any delay obviously gives time to vaccinate a large proportion of the population, so that's good. So I think what's been discussed is maybe 2, maybe 4 weeks. One difficulty is not to delay too much.
So your best guess is perhaps a 2-week delay?
Optimistically, I would predict a 2-week delay should be enough.
That may be the best case scenario, but there is no doubt infections are now on the march. And the question is, have we vaccinated enough people to avoid what some are saying is now the inevitable?
Let's go back to talking about this decision day on Monday. What do you think will happen?
Well, I mean, there's still a few more days of data for the government to look at. They'll be poring over everything that came out today before they make their decision. But I have to say, I haven't spoken to anybody today who still thinks it's a good idea to open up on the 21st of June. Even the BMA, the British Medical Association, is now calling on the government to delay it. That, along with all the local public health directors. And their main argument is that they just want more time to vaccinate and they don't want to reverse all the progress they have already made. And I think really the data today really just speaks for itself. 8,000 new cases today. We haven't seen that sort of daily rise since February, and hospital admissions are now really beginning to tick up. So I don't think the question is there going to be a delay? It's more like, how long is that delay going to be? And the answer to that really depends on how safe the government wants to be. So a 2-week delay for the government would allow them to vaccinate a few more people, yes, and give them some data on whether cases are translating into hospitalisations. But a 4-week delay would guarantee that data. They'd be able to see whether the vaccine is really keeping people out of hospital. It would also allow them a little extra time to offer all the over 40s 2 jabs, and that's absolutely crucial because we know 2 vaccinations is the most effective way of dealing with the Delta variant, and it would also give them time to offer pretty much every other adult 1 dose of the vaccine, and that would have a real impact, a significant impact on the virus. And I think most people are looking at that scenario, a 4-week delay, and just thinking it's a bit of a no-brainer.
OK. Emily, thank you. Kent County Council today said that because of growing pressure on their services, they'll no longer be accepting unaccompanied child migrants. From Monday, those who do arrive will now remain in the care of the Home Office. Kent is currently caring for over 400 child migrants, nearly twice the number they say they can safely accommodate.
Many of the children whose lives have been put at risk crossing the channel in small boats have come with their parents, but not all of them. Kent County Council say they can safely look after 231 unaccompanied migrant children. They now have more than 420, and from Monday will take no more.
We will not be able to send our staff to the port to pick up the unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people who arrive on Kent's shores. The reason for that is, above all, that our services are now under severe strain.
There is supposed to be a national transfer system, isn't there, to get these young people out to other local authorities. Why isn't that working?
The problem with it is that it's always been a voluntary system. That can occasionally work a bit for a while, but then rapidly peters out.
It's the second time Kent have stopped taking unaccompanied migrant children, and potentially means longer waits on the dockside at Dover for those who do arrive.
There's a risk that what happened last year will happen again, and that is that children were kept for long periods of time in what's called the Kent Intake Unit, which is a building down by the harbour. There is nowhere to sleep there, and children were being kept there for up to 72 hours. So it's a really significant issue for us.
Kent County Council have already threatened legal action against the Home Secretary over the pressure on their services and say they're awaiting a response. A Home Office spokesperson thanked Kent Council for all they'd done and said the government had both updated and put more money into the scheme which transfers these children out into other local authority areas. But councillors in Kent clearly believe the scheme isn't working and say it now needs to be made compulsory. The sheer number of migrants arriving, more than 1,000 now since the start of June, and the problems housing unaccompanied minors are once again becoming a political problem.
We are talking about some of the most vulnerable people on earth, traumatised, lone children we should be offering home and safe haven to. That we've got to this stage really is an indication of the failure of this government.
But the people traffickers have the most to answer for. 2 days ago, we filmed this migrant boat as a gas tanker headed straight for it. But for a radio warning from a Border Force vessel, there could have been another tragedy. Carl Dinnan, News at 10, Westminster.
A year late because of COVID and staged in a completely new way, the 2020 European Football Championships finally started tonight. Instead of having a traditional host nation, the games are being held across the whole of the continent, with fans, restricted in number of course, allowed into the stadiums to watch. In the opening match tonight, Italy beat Turkey 3-0 in Rome.
Not that long ago, it was feared these delayed Euros would have to take place inside empty stadia. COVID has still ensured grounds won't be full to bursting, but like at the opening game in Rome tonight, at least they won't be silent. No more appropriate soundtrack for the first act in a drama that will play out over the next month. As the game itself wore on, Turkey gifted Italy the breakthrough. That moment prompted more pyrotechnics from the home side. A classy and convincing start from one of the many teams capable of winning this tournament. 3-0, the final score. Earlier today, the last of up to 1,000 Welsh supporters headed east, bound for Baku. Wales, the first of the home nations to play. Their last Euros campaign involved a run to the semi-finals.
I think we just have to take each game as it comes, like we did last time. I think we can't get too carried away. We have a very difficult group to get out of, so yeah, we have to take each game as it comes.
Euro 2020 is a tournament like no other, being played in 11 different cities across Europe. Tomorrow, all eyes are on Azerbaijan, where Wales take on Switzerland. England are the second of the home nations in action against Croatia at Wembley on Sunday. And then on Monday, Scotland kick off their championships at Hampden Park versus the Czech Republic.
On Sunday, Gareth Southgate will stand here and address his squad for the last time before their opener against Croatia. Every other manager will be hoping they finish their tournament doing exactly the same, because on the evening of Sunday, July the 11th, this will be one of the dressing rooms for the Wembley final.
As ever, England won't go short of support for what is effectively a home tournament for them.
I would say it's one of the most patriotic states you'll ever see in your life, to be fair. Not just in England, across Europe, all over the place.
You've got Foden, you've got Rashford, they're young, they're ambitious, they want it, they're hungry, and that's what gives me the spirit as well.
And Scottish fans are sure to make the most of what is a first major tournament for them in 23 years.
If Scotland weren't in it, then I wouldn't be really interested. So I'm happy that Scotland are in the Euros.
I'm looking forward to the atmosphere, and it's going to be like a lifetime, like things to remember, you know.
It's been a long time coming and still faces COVID challenges, but after the past 12 months, the tournament is set to provide a welcome distraction for many millions right around Europe. Steve Scott, News at 10, Wembley.
Well, as Steve mentioned, Wales play Switzerland in Baku tomorrow. Lucy Watson's outside the Wales team hotel for us. Not long to wait now for Welsh fans, Lucy.
No, Charlene, there are 15 hours to go until the big game. This is where the players are staying. It's nearly 2 a.m, so presumably they're all in bed. But there was a really great atmosphere in the centre of Baku this evening as those Wales fans started to filter through the bars and the restaurants. Around 600 to 700 of them are expected here by tomorrow. Now, inside that stadium where they'll perform, normally around 70,000 people can sit inside the stadium, but tomorrow only half that number will be allowed because of COVID restrictions. But up until yesterday, only 6,000 tickets had in fact been sold. Some of the Wales fans we spoke to this evening had come from nearby Dubai, naturally some from Cardiff, and one man had come from Northampton on a one-way ticket. He doesn't know how or when he'll get home yet. Now, tomorrow's game is pivotal. The Swiss are in fact the favourites, but if Wales get their tactics right and they come away with a win, they will gain confidence and momentum that could see them through this group stage. Get them wrong, however, and they'll have a mountain to climb.
For a very windy Baku, Lucy, thanks very much. And at a change of heart tonight, Scotland's players said they will take the knee in solidarity with the England team when the two nations meet for their Euro 2020 game at Wembley next week. Earlier, Boris Johnson's spokesman said the PM does support the rights of England players to make the gesture. He called on fans not to boo the team for taking the knee, but to get behind them for their games and cheer them on. A huge operation is underway in China involving hundreds of police officers to monitor a wandering herd of wild elephants. Over the past year, they've trekked nearly 350 miles from their home on a reserve on the mountains of Yunnan province. And they're currently gathered near the city of Yishi, with police trying to divert them away from towns and villages. Homes have been evacuated and ditches have been dug to keep them safe, while millions of people across the world watch the elephants' every move online.
Their journey has taken them more than 300 miles across China, from a remote forest to the edge of Kunming, a city of 8 million people. The plight and flight of these 15 animals has captured the imagination of the Chinese, fascinated to see these endangered creatures on their odyssey. As they've approached civilization, the government has been trying to protect them and offer food to stop them rampaging through farmers' fields. Already more than a ton of food has been brought to the herd in an astonishing operation to feed the animals and monitor their journey. More than 1,500 policemen have been deployed, equipped with drones to remotely track them. The elephants have been stopping wherever they can to drink, here using a local well. But experts say while some of these images are undeniably cute, the factors driving this migration are sobering.
It's happening all across both Africa and Asia in the sort of traditional home ranges of elephants, because we're increasingly encroaching on them. And so they, as the habitat gets destroyed and the landscape becomes more and more fragmented, they're having to go out and range more widely, and they're inadvertently coming into contact with humans. I mean, what we're seeing is this is part of a much larger problem, not just for all elephants worldwide, but actually for wildlife worldwide as we're destroying habitats.
Their long trek shows no sign of ending, but the herd is being monitored around the clock as the authorities try to decide whether they need to intervene or simply let this extended family enjoy its holiday, which, for this little one, must feel like an awfully big adventure. Dan Rivers, News at 10.
Finally, after an extraordinary year of change that saw communities come together as the lives of others were torn apart, it's only fitting that the Queen's birthday list reflects those whose selfless work has helped to ease the pain for so many. There are, of course, names on the list you may recognise: the singer Lulu, the footballer Raheem Sterling, the film star Jonathan Pryce, for instance. But this year it's the unsung heroes who are getting the star treatment.
People who just stripping the shelves of basic foods.
In the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. In this case, the opportunity to help.
Because it's people like me that are going to be looking after you when you're at your lowest.
This video of nurse Dawn Bilborough, unable to buy food because of panic buying during lockdown, inspired this. Food for Heroes was set up to provide meals for NHS staff on the front line. Now, their efforts, along with many others, have been recognised in the Queen's birthday honours.
This is a true honour, really is.
There are hundreds of incredible volunteers and the chefs who are behind all of this, and without them we wouldn't be here receiving this. It's just phenomenal.
Also on the list, the masterminds responsible for the UK's COVID vaccination programme. The woman who designed the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, Professor Sarah Gilbert, is made a dame, along with the former head of the UK Vaccine Task Force, Kate Bingham, who said, "I am proud but also humbled to be recognised. The development of vaccines has been a triumph of science and industrial collaboration. I hope this encourages more girls to pursue careers in these sectors."
The world needs more vaccines, and I would urge you to play your role.
It's thanks, in part, to this woman that essential clinical trials for COVID vaccines took place in the UK. She receives an OBE for her work.
I feel deeply honoured. I also feel very humbled. I moved from India to the UK when I was 18, with big dreams. And my father said to me, make sure you do good and make sure you do something good enough to meet the Queen. So to me, this is such an utmost culmination of what he said. And I lost my father last year. So for me, I feel this is just such a recognition, and hopefully he's proud of me.
She says receiving this award is also motivation to continue her work on vital clinical trials fighting other killer diseases. So perhaps more good can come from this crisis. Rebecca Barry, News at 10.
And that's all from the News at 10 team tonight. Of course, ITV News will be following the G7 summit and the Euros across the weekend, both here and online. But from us, it's good night for now. Bye-bye.